Goedendag, y'all. It's a bit late in the day to be welcoming anyone to the event, so I'll just say thanks for sticking around this long for this the final presentation of CloudStack and Ceph Day, Netherlands. My name's Olaf, and I have the privilege of walking you fine folk through some of the basics of Ceph, or as the session title was pitched, a beginner's guide. So kind of like an American traveling through Europe and trying to visit every country they can in 30 days, we're going to try to talk about as many Ceph topics as we can in 30 minutes. The similarity here is that every stop on their trip will be just a brief overview and nothing like the deep dives that my esteemed colleagues have provided you with already today. If you truly are a beginner and you've sat through this entire day of presentations, you probably already had your crash course, and maybe you already know everything, but hopefully this will serve as maybe review or fill in some knowledge gaps. And if you're not a beginner, I'm sorry, I'll speed this up and go as quick as I can. So I've spent my career surrounded by IT professionals like yourselves, and I knew you all to be highly intelligent, somewhere on the range of somewhat opinionated to extremely opinionated, and you're usually very good at backing up those opinions with information. There are some of us, like myself, we have a hard time expressing what we know into coherent sentences. So this is why when I'm learning about a new topic, I like to have a lot of explicit definitions and keywords for those subjects that I'm trying to learn. So this was part of the impetus for this talk, to provide that kind of content. But as we'll see as we go along, there's not always a nice clear-cut definition, dictionary definition for all the topics, or any particular subject. But anyway, let's get started and begin our beginner's guide at the beginning. So where did Ceph come from? Ceph was originally developed by a gentleman by the name of Sage Wild back in 2003 as part of his PhD project at the University of California in Santa Cruz. This first iteration of Ceph only implemented the Ceph file system. The Ceph was later on open sourced in 2006 under the lesser general public license. And so in the following years, the various institutions and companies, but most especially other developers, supported the further development of Ceph. And in 2012, the same Mr. Weil founded the company Inktank to help support enterprise customers. And then in 2004, this little company called Red Hat agreed to acquire Inktank, and here we all are. What's in a name when anything else arose by any other name, not sell a sweet? So what does Ceph mean? So there's a little known story about how when Mr. Weil was working on his PhD, he's writing Ceph, and one of the professors in his department was kind of a naysayer. He was always known for being in a bad mood. He kept on, putting down Sage's ideas and telling him that it wasn't going to work. He was, I don't know, I think he was a European from one of those little countries around here. I don't know, you guys got a bunch of, I don't remember. But so it was really starting to get to Sage, it's bringing him down to the point that some of the other professors in the department realized and saw that, this is, I need to say something. So the one professor pulls Mr. Weil aside and tells him, don't worry about that guy. Cranky Europeans prevent happiness. And he thought that was such good advice that he built it into the name of his storage engine. That is a lie. I made that up. That's not true at all. So Ceph isn't acronym. Ceph isn't this acronym at all. It's short for cephalopod, and this brings us to our first dictionary definition of the talk. So a cephalopod is any of the marine animals belonging to the cephalopodia class of mollusks. Those include like squids and octopuses or octopi, whatever you want to say. They're supposedly correct. But interesting bit of information, banana slugs belong to a separate but very much related class of mollusks called gastropods. What do banana slugs have to do with our talk? Funny, you should ask. Because this comes to depends on what you know about schools in America, or in the United States, sorry. There is evidently some unwritten rules somewhere that every school in the United States has to have a mascot. Like even my elementary school had a mascot. We were the Little River Beavers. So that gets propagated up through middle school, high school, universities, and I'm sure you've noticed there's American universities make a lot of money off of their merchandising of their logos and especially their mascots. So yeah, it turns out that the University of California in Santa Cruz, their mascot is a banana slug. So that's actually where, supposedly where Mr. Weil got the idea from. Keeping it all in the family, banana slugs, octopuses. I didn't make that up. You can Google that. I didn't grab one of their logos because I didn't want to get in trouble. But so UCSC, that's the University of California in Santa Cruz, and SAMMY, SAMMY. You can Google that and giggle yourself silly at all the funny things Californians do. Nobody's looking. Or when everybody's looking. So in my search for a definition of what Ceph, for a definition for Ceph, I came across many descriptions. Some were more helpful than others, but eventually I found my perfect dictionary definition from an author, Nick Fist, and that's half blocked out, so let me do that for you. The open source, distributed, scaled out, software-defined storage system that can provide block, cluster, and file storage. Now, I like this definition because it lays out exactly what kind of storage Ceph provides, because a lot of other folks gloss over it and just say that Ceph is a unified offering, which, sure, it is, and it's unified now, but what happens when Elon Musk invents plasma storage or speed of light storage, then, that kind of... anyway, so the point being that it's nice to have that broken out if you're going to try to define something. So let's go bit by bit, a little bit, and go through our definition. Ceph is open source, which doesn't need much explanation. It's the opposite of closed source, so that you can all the code is available for anybody and everyone to look at. Being an open source project comes with kind of an ethos, right? There's if they're lucky, an open source project has a sense of community. They have a sense of group effort, greater good that maybe doesn't exist in a closed source product. I would argue there are plenty of benefits to open source. One of the tangible aspects of open source are really kind of software development, but especially open source is a release cycle. So Ceph is currently on the release that was released in September of last year. Quincy is going out of life in June of this year, and I think Pacific is, I guess, not technically supported, but still active, still around. I didn't bother listing out all of the releases because that's not a lot of useful information. I think the only thing to point out is that the package numbering changed in between the Infernales and Hammer, or vice versa, Hammer and Infernales releases, and so now the first number of the release package version is also corresponds to that letter of the alphabet. So Jewel, J, is the 10th letter of the alphabet, and that's pretty common among some open source projects. Slip of the tongue, of course. I think OpenStack comes to mind because they, it's always interesting to watch this progress, because once you get to the end of the alphabet, like OpenStack did a little bit ago, it's interesting to see what are you going to do once you get to Z? Because number one, there's not a whole lot of names or words that end in X, Y, and Z. Like the first iteration of OpenStack releases were always based on a city name of someplace close to the city of the last summit. But by the time they got to Z, all they could think of was Z. I don't think that's actually a city. Maybe I'm wrong. But anyway, so once that was all city names, now they started over with animal names. The release after that was Antelope, I believe. That's right. But they also started adding a year and version. So I think the official name is 2003.1 Antelope. But anyway, so it'll be interesting in about 8 years from now when Ceph gets that far and there's a Z release that either nobody can pronounce or is pretty obscure. Continuing with our breakdown of terms used in that definition of Ceph, Ceph is software-defined storage, which is a system of abstracting data storage so that the provisioning and management of the storage are separated from the underlying hardware, which is definitely true of Ceph. Anything that's consuming any of the core Ceph services is not talking to the underlying hardware. I've also included a second definition that I found on that bastion of knowledge, Wikipedia. It essentially says the same thing, but it calls software-defined storage a marketing term, which is kind of jaded for Wikipedia. I don't know what axe to grind that author had, but anyway. So when I got to trying to find definitions for the types of storage that Ceph provides, it didn't work out as well and it wasn't quite as helpful. We want to store files. Files go in the file system. What's a file system? Method of organizing and retrieving files from a storage medium like a hard drive. That's not particularly insightful, but we don't have to overthink this. File storage organizes and represents data as a hierarchy of files. I'm pretty sure everyone here is extremely familiar with file systems. They've been around since at least the 1960s. You've got a root directory, you've got files and folders off of that root directory, and any combination you want. Most popular file systems today are most assuredly FAT32 and NTFS. And file system storage in Ceph is provided by CephFS, or the Ceph file system. You can kind of think of CephFS as it's like NFS, but certainly not one and the same, which is demonstrated by the fact that you can actually run NFS on top of CephFS. Ceph also provides block storage, which is when the data is split into fixed blocks of data and then stored separately with unique identifiers. That's a fancy way of saying, I guess, that you can, just like the name implies, with block storage, you get a huge block of storage, and maybe that storage is carved up in smaller pieces, is most assuredly carved up into smaller pieces, but it's all part of the same disk. This is a most concrete example of block storage would be a volume for one of our VMs, but also somewhat analogous to iSCSI or Fiber Channel appliance. And in Ceph, block storage is provided by the RBD, or the Rados block device. And finally, Ceph provides object storage, a system that divides data into separate self-contained units that are restored in a flat environment, all objects at the same level. Nomenclature for the implementation of Swift and S3 is somewhat pretty helpful and also kind of self-intuitive. You get a bucket and it's full of stuff. There's no hierarchy. You've got pictures in there, or disk images, or pictures and disk images. It's all one big bucket. Exactly. No hierarchy that involved. So the service in Ceph that provides this object storage is called the Rados Gateway. Now, there has been a marked absence of diagrams in our beginner's guide. Let's change that. I lifted this directly off of the Ceph documentation page, and it looks incredibly similar to a diagram we just saw in the last presentation. But as you starting on the far right, you've got CephFS, which is providing a file system to a client. So they mounted that file system. Your VMs are using a big block of storage for their disk drive that's provided by RBD, and apps are using the Rados gateway to get to their buckets. These top four, well, I guess not the very top four, but the middle four are all what's called the core services of Ceph. We haven't talked about LibreDOS yet, which is well, I guess we should. It's a Ceph library that you get that's used to talk, not directly, but used to talk to Rados. So CephFS, the file system was implemented first. It talks to Rados by itself. The other ones go through LibreDOS, and you can write your own service to talk to Rados using LibreDOS. That's our core services described. Let's move on to some of Ceph's core components that we've just mentioned at least 4 times in the past minutes. Rados, which stands for the Reliable, Autonomous, Distributed Object Store, not to be confused with Object Store service that's providing that's a low-level data object store. As the name implies, it is wholeheartedly responsible for managing the distribution of data within Ceph. It ensures that multiple copies of data are maintained. It does all of this by implementing Crush, which is the controlled replication under scalable hashing. As Mr. Weil calls it himself, Crush is the magic that figures out where all the data in the system should go, and everyone can repeat this calculation. Every member of the cluster, and know where to read or write data. It's Ceph or Crush that really makes Ceph unique, because most other storage solutions will have a bottleneck for some kind of lookup table or something like that. That's how Ceph gets around it. It becomes as resilient as it is. And that's about that, right? Yeah, that's about as far as we're going to get in our beginner's guide. There's a great YouTube video by Mr. Weil himself, where he takes an entire hour to describe how Crush works. So that's beyond our purview at the moment. He talks about they used object storage daemons. Of course, there's the monitors. They didn't even get a slide today. Poor guys. But some of the other components. There are other more core components that we're going to just gloss over, because this is a guide. So IBM, when they give you a slide deck that's branded, and it's really nice. It comes with loads of diagrams, charts that you can use for presenting, but it's really, really light on usable images. And so I try to throw in one of these useless images in every talk I give. So this is going to be this lady is going to represent our collective moms. And this goes back to a story a friend of mine told me about a decade ago. He was one of the core contributors to many OpenStack projects, and was trying to relate to his parents what he did for them. And his mom asked him, "What is this OpenStack thing? Should I download?" Which I thought was pretty funny, because I knew her, and hopefully she didn't download the whole internet while she was trying to do that. But I think it's probably safe to say that none of our moms should be or would find Ceph very useful. That being said, who would? If the last talk showed us anything, CloudStack, or this entire day shows us CloudStack would be a very good user of Ceph. Likewise, OpenStack can make use of all 3 kinds of storage that Ceph provides. In fact, I think the most recent user survey for OpenStack shows that the majority of installations are already using Ceph as their backend. What else could you do with Ceph? If you needed a big, huge chunk of block storage, it would provide it for you. If you're tired of paying Amazon for the privilege of them giving all your data to the CIA, you can run your own S3 cluster. Or if you needed to replace your NAS, you could use the distributed file system that Ceph provides. And clearly, there's no shortage of people looking to use storage because there are plenty of solutions out there. The one I know the most about would be Storage Scale, coming from IBM. So Storage Scale used to be called Spectrum Scale, and it used to be called GPFS before that, which is the General Parallel File System. It's a bit dated, and also I know plenty of people at work that would say that they can outperform Ceph in many regards with Storage Scale. I've never seen it, so I'm not gonna confirm or deny that report. But most people's biggest gripe about Storage Scale is that it is not open source. Lustre is also owned by Red Hat, and Lustre is open source as well. But they both fall into that kind of bottleneck when it comes to looking up where data is across all their disks. And Hadoop, that's provides another bottleneck that Ceph avoids. If we're going to use Ceph, we've got to install it somehow. How are we going to do that? Ceph Deploy is the official tool, I guess, from Ceph's point of view for deploying Ceph clusters. But it's from what I can gather, it is not the most popular way to deploy Ceph. Luckily for me, somebody already took care of introducing Ceph Ansible earlier in the day. But as Ansible gets more and more popular, I'm sure that'll be a bigger and bigger piece of the pie that gets captured. But pretty much, any orchestration you want to use, Puppet, Chef, Salts, they all have their own cookbooks or playbooks or whatever they have to install Ceph. And of course, the separate project Rook is how you would get it installed using Kubernetes. We mentioned earlier the community around an open source project, of which Ceph is, I think, lucky to have it, is incredibly involved when they have they're on Slack. So I got all these off of the main page from the Connect section. I spend a lot of my day at work on Slack, so I avoided outside there as much as I can, and prefer to do like the old school guys and talk to everybody on IRC. They have those 6 IRC channels. There's also 4 mailing lists. And of course, if you want to keep in touch, keep involved in the community, there's events like this one. There's also TikToks they have on a regular basis, and virtual meetings happen every day, at least 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of them. And that's all on their website. All that being said, Dr. Ben.